On my nephew's birthday, when I asked my family for my credit cards and laptop back from which they were stealing my money, my brother and mother started screaming in anger. Then my father snatched my crutch, and when I fell to the ground, my father hit me on the head with the crutch so hard that my brain went blank and blood spread everywhere. But just 2 seconds before I was plunged into darkness, I pressed a button that revealed the dark truth about my family to the 50 guests present, making every moment of the party a horrible nightmare for them. Before I tell you how I became disabled and the chilling details of how my own family betrayed me, do me a quick favor. Drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching this from and what time it is there. I absolutely love seeing where my global family is tuning in from. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Hi, I'm Christina, and I'm 27 years old. And if you had met me 18 months ago, you would have seen a woman who completely defined herself by how much she could sacrifice for the people she loved. I lived and worked in a beautiful brick-faced suburb of Columbus, Ohio, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns were always perfectly manicured and the houses all looked like pictures from a real estate magazine. I worked as a lead data analyst for a major financial tech firm based right here in the city. I was good at what I did. I spent my days staring at complex code, untangling massive, chaotic streams of numbers, and turning them into predictable, orderly structures. It was a high-stress, high-reward corporate world, but I thrived in it. By the time I turned 26, my hard work had paid off, and I was comfortably pulling in a six-figure salary. But I didn't care about luxury for myself. I didn't buy designer clothes, and I didn't take expensive vacations to Europe. No, I poured every single ounce of my financial success right back into my family. I was raised to believe that blood was thicker than water, that family was an unbreakable bond, and that if one person succeeded, it was their moral obligation to lift everyone else up. My father, Roger, and my mother, Megan, never missed an opportunity to remind me of that. They made sure I knew that they had sacrificed their youth to raise me. And so, the moment my bank account started growing, I took over the financial burdens of the entire household. I became the invisible pillar holding up their lives. Every single month, like clockwork, a $2,400 automatic transfer left my account to pay the mortgage on my parents' house. I didn't want them to worry about losing their home. When my younger brother Austin complained that his old car was breaking down and that he couldn't get a good job without a reliable ride, I didn't hesitate. I went to the dealership and financed a sleek, brand new luxury truck for him, quietly absorbing the $650 monthly payment into my own budget. And it didn't stop there. Austin's wife, Teresa, constantly struggled with credit card debt from her high-end shopping sprees, and whenever the collection calls got too loud, it was always Christina who quietly wired the money to clear the balances. I was their human ATM, their safety net, their endless well of cash. They called me their golden girl and told everyone at Sunday dinners how incredibly proud they were of me. I felt loved. I felt appreciated. I truly believed that my money was buying our collective happiness and security. I was so blinded by my desire to be the perfect, beautiful daughter and sister that I completely missed the subtle shift in their behavior. I didn't see the entitlement hardening in their eyes. I didn't realize that they didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. I was completely oblivious to the terrifying truth that they were slowly transforming into financial parasites. And the moment I stopped giving, they were prepared to bleed me dry. Everything changed on a cold, rainy November evening in downtown Columbus. The sky was the color of bruised iron, and the streets were slick with a treacherous mix of freezing rain and oil. I had just finished a grueling 10-hour shift at my computer and decided to drive down to a local organic grocery store to pick up some items for a family dinner I was hosting that weekend. I remember the rhythmic, hypnotic sound of my windshield wipers, the soft hum of the heater, and the glow of the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I was stopped at a major intersection on High Street, waiting patiently for the light to turn green. I never saw him coming. A heavy pickup truck driven by someone who had consumed far too much alcohol at a nearby bar straight through a solid red light at 45 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic. The truck slammed directly into the driver's side door of my compact sedan. The sound of tearing metal and shattering glass was deafening, a sudden violent roar that cut through the quiet night. My car was violently thrown across 3 lanes of traffic before wrapping around a concrete utility pole. For a few terrifying seconds, my world was a chaotic blur of spinning lights, suffocating white dust from the deployed airbags, and a blinding, searing agony that exploded through my right leg. I was trapped in the crushed cockpit of my car, drifting in and out of consciousness, listening to the frantic screams of bystanders echoing from a distance. It took the Columbus emergency crews nearly 45 minutes to cut me out of the wreckage using the jaws of life. I was rushed to the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center under emergency lights. The diagnosis was grim. My right femur was shattered into multiple fragments, and my hip joint was completely dislocated and fractured. I underwent a grueling 6-hour emergency surgery where doctors pieced together my bone using titanium rods, plates, and a dozen surgical screws. When I finally woke up in the intensive care unit, pale, exhausted, and hooked up to a cocktail of heavy intravenous painkillers, my orthopedic surgeon sat by my bedside. He looked at me with a serious, empathetic expression. "Christina, you survived a crash that should have taken your life," he said softly. "But the damage to your hip is severe. This first surgery was just to stabilize you. To ever walk normally again without a permanent severe limp, you are going to need a highly specialized secondary orthopedic reconstruction surgery in about 6 months. It's a complex procedure, and because of your specific out-of-network corporate insurance policy details, it's going to cost you $45,000 out of pocket." I nodded through my tears, gripping my heavy medical-grade aluminum crutches that now sat propped against the hospital wall. $45,000 was a massive sum, but I wasn't entirely panicked. I was a saver. I knew I had a dedicated emergency savings account where I had been quietly accumulating funds for a rainy day. I had exactly $45,000 sitting in that account, untouched, waiting to give me my life back. But my family saw my vulnerability not as a tragedy to be comforted, but as an opportunity to be exploited. 2 days after I was discharged and brought back to my parents' house to recover, heavily sedated and unable to even stand without an agonizing wave of nausea, Roger and Austin staged what they called a family intervention in the living room. Megan and Teresa sat on the couch looking at me with faces full of manufactured, dripping concern. Roger sat on the edge of my bed, his voice low and soothing. "Christina, honey, look at you. You're completely traumatized, and these heavy painkillers are making you confused. You can barely keep your eyes open, let alone manage the stress of your high-tech job or your complex financial accounts." Austin stepped forward, reaching onto my nightstand and picking up my heavy-duty company laptop, my personal phone, and my primary business credit cards. "We're doing this because we love you, sis," Austin said, his voice smooth, though his eyes were darting toward the laptop screen. "We're going to take over your devices and your online banking portals. I'll look after your remote data entry logs so your company doesn't fire you, and Dad will manage the banking. You just focus on healing. Let us handle the heavy lifting." I was too weak to fight. The pain medication clouded my judgment, making my brain feel like it was wrapped in thick cotton. I looked at my mother, Megan, who gave me a reassuring nod. "Trust your father and brother, Christina. Family takes care of family." With a faded, drug-induced sense of gratitude, I muttered my passwords and handed over my digital life. I closed my eyes, believing with every fiber of my being that my family was stepping up to shield me from the world. I didn't realize that I had just handed the keys to my kingdom to a pack of wolves. For the next 6 months, I lived like a ghost inside my parents' house. I was entirely dependent on my heavy aluminum crutches to move even a few feet, my right leg throbbing with a dull, constant ache that reminded me every second of what I had lost. Because I couldn't drive or easily access the physical world, my environment shrank to the 4 walls of my childhood bedroom. Austin and Roger would occasionally walk into my room, throw a casual update about my job, and tell me that everything was being handled. "Don't stress your head with numbers, Christina," Roger would say, patting my shoulder. "We're keeping the lights on. Just focus on getting better." I felt isolated, but I continuously comforted myself with the thought that my $45,000 medical fund was sitting safely in my savings account, waiting for the day my surgeon cleared me for the reconstruction operation. Then came the middle of May, and with it, my nephew Liam's 6th birthday. Austin and Teresa didn't believe in simple birthday parties. They lived in an upscale, competitive neighborhood in Columbus, where parents used their children's parties as a weapon to flaunt their wealth. Teresa decided that Liam needed an extravagant, over-the-top, superhero-themed outdoor festival. For a solid week, the backyard of Austin's house was transformed. A massive, custom-built wooden adventure playset was delivered and assembled by a professional crew. A catering company set up industrial warming trays and a gourmet slider bar. They even hired a professional videography team with drones to capture every single angle of the event for Teresa's social media accounts. I was brought over to Austin's house on the morning of the party, propped up on my crutches in the corner of the chaotic, crowded living room. Over 50 guests, neighbors, corporate colleagues of Austin, and wealthy parents from Liam's private school flooded the house and backyard. Everyone was laughing, drinking expensive wine, and marveling at the sheer luxury of the setup. I sat there quietly, feeling like a prop, an afterthought in my own family's grand showcase of success. Around mid-afternoon, the house cleared out slightly as everyone gathered in the backyard to watch Liam climb the massive new playset. I stayed inside, my leg aching too badly from the humidity to stand outside in the sun. As I sat on the living room sofa, I noticed Teresa's designer handbag sitting wide open on the nearby dining table. Inside it, a screen was repeatedly flashing and buzzing. I frowned. It wasn't Teresa's usual phone. The sleek matte black case was instantly recognizable. It was my old corporate work phone, the one Austin had taken 6 months ago under the guise of managing my remote job logs. An uneasy feeling, cold and sharp, twisted in my stomach. Why was my work phone inside Teresa's personal purse at a birthday party? Why wasn't it in Austin's home office? Driven by a sudden, uncontrollable instinct, I gripped my crutches, stood up, and carefully limped over to the table. I reached into the bag and pulled the phone out. Because the biometric thumbprint scan was still set to my own hand, the device instantly unlocked the moment my fingers gripped the chassis. The home screen was completely buried under a mountain of real-time text alerts and notification banners from my primary banking app. I tapped on the banking icon, my breath hitching in my throat. What I saw on that screen made the room spin violently around me. My dedicated medical savings account, the account that was supposed to hold the $45,000 for my upcoming leg surgery, was completely empty. The balance read exactly $0. My hands began to shake so hard I nearly dropped the phone. With a racing heart, I frantically scrolled through the transaction history of the past 48 hours. My family hadn't just dipped into my money, they had systematically slaughtered my savings. There was a wire transfer of $15,000 directly to the luxury playground construction company. There was a $5,000 debit charge to the high-end catering service. And the final crushing blow was a pending transaction of $20,000 authorized just yesterday by Roger using my forged signature as a massive down payment to a local luxury dealership for a brand new sports car registered under Austin's name. They had completely wiped me out. They had taken the money meant to give me back my ability to walk, the money I had earned through blood, sweat, and 10-hour workdays, and they had incinerated it on a 6-year-old's birthday party and a new toy for my brother. I stood there in the quiet dining room, the distant sounds of laughter and children cheering from the backyard echoing through the windows, feeling a level of betrayal that physically nauseated me. I wasn't their sister or their daughter. I was a carcass, and they were vultures tearing away the last pieces of my flesh. I stood frozen in the dining room, my eyes locked onto that cold, glowing screen as the brutal truth cemented itself in my mind. The tears that usually came so easily when I felt overwhelmed didn't fall this time. Instead, a terrifying, icy stillness washed over me. The girl who used to crave her parents' approval, the girl who would gladly empty her pockets just to see her brother smile. She died right there in that room, surrounded by the muffled sounds of children playing and adults clinking glasses outside. I looked through the large glass patio doors out into the sun-drenched backyard. I watched my mother Megan adjusting her expensive linen dress, pointing and laughing at something Teresa said. I saw Austin leaning casually against his shiny new truck, a look of smug, unearned satisfaction plastered across his face. These were the people who had held my hand in the hospital. These were the people who had looked me in the eyes and whispered that they were protecting me because family takes care of family. It was all a calculated, sick lie. They didn't see a healing daughter or a recovering sister. They saw a disabled cash cow that couldn't easily fight back. They had willingly and deliberately chosen to keep me crippled, to trap me on these metal crutches forever, just so they could fund a lifestyle of fake luxury and show off to their superficial neighbors. They thought my physical limitation made me weak. They thought that because my body was broken, my mind was broken too. I slowly slipped my work phone deep into my cardigan pocket and wrapped my white-knuckled fingers tightly around the handles of my aluminum crutches. Every ounce of pain in my shattered hip vanished, replaced by a pure, burning dose of adrenaline. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling a cold, ruthless determination take root in my chest. Being kind had gotten me a shattered body and a stolen life. Being the sacrificial lamb had left me with nothing. I wiped my face one last time, leveled my posture, and prepared to show my family exactly what happens when you steal from the person who keeps your world spinning. It was time to stop hiding in the shadows of their greed. I gripped my aluminum crutches, aligned my posture, and pushed through the heavy glass patio doors, stepping out onto the crowded backyard deck. The birthday music was blasting, a cheerful pop song that felt sickeningly out of place against the rage boiling inside me. 50 guests were gathered around the grand three-tiered superhero cake. Austin stood right in the center, his arm wrapped around Teresa, while my mother Megan clapped her hands as little Liam picked up the plastic knife to cut the first slice. I didn't wait. I used my crutches to force my way directly into the center of the circle, stopping right on the opposite side of the table facing my brother. The crowd fell quiet, the sudden appearance of the pale, silent, disabled sister cutting right through the festive atmosphere. "Austin," I said, my voice cutting through the open air like a razor blade. "I need my company laptop and my credit cards right now." Austin's smile instantly froze. He forced a strained, nervous laugh, glancing around at his corporate colleagues. "Christina, honey, what are you doing? We're cutting the cake. Go sit back inside. You're getting confused again." "I am not confused," I said, pulling my old work phone out of my pocket and slamming it down onto the table right next to the cake. "I just saw the bank logs. You drained my $45,000 orthopedic surgery fund. You spent $15,000 on this playset, $5,000 on the food, and you put $20,000 down on a sports car using my forged signature. You stole my ability to walk again, Austin." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of neighbors and friends. Megan's face turned an ugly mottled shade of crimson. She stepped forward, her voice raising to a screeching pitch. "Christina, shut your mouth right now. How dare you make up such disgusting lies in front of our guests? You are mentally unstable from all those painkillers. We have sacrificed everything to nurse you back to health, you ungrateful little brat." Austin's eyes darkened, dropping the fake brotherly act entirely. He leaned over the table, his face inches from mine, and hissed, "You don't own a damn thing anymore, Christina. You're a useless who can't even stand up without our permission. Get the hell out of my yard." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice perfectly calm, cold, and echoing across the silent lawn. "I have already downloaded the digital forensic logs. If my laptop, my phone, and my credit cards are not in my hands in exactly 3 seconds, I am calling the Columbus Police Department. I will have every single one of you locked up for grand theft, identity fraud, and embezzlement." Hearing the word police in front of his wealthy neighbors and business partners broke my father, Roger. He had been standing quietly by the grill, but now he erupted. He lunged forward like a rabid animal, his face twisted in a mask of pure, uncontrolled fury. "You think you can threaten my family?" he roared. Before anyone could react, Roger grabbed the left crutch right out from under my armpit and yanked it away with violent force. Without the support, my balance vanished instantly. I let out a sharp cry as my broken hip gave out and I crashed violently sideways onto the hard wood of the deck, my head smacking against the base of a heavy wooden chair. The crowd erupted into screams of absolute horror, but Roger wasn't done. Blinded by rage and the fear of being exposed, he raised the heavy solid aluminum crutch high above his head like a baseball bat. "You ruin everything!" he screamed and brought the metal bar crashing directly down into my skull. A blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, followed by a searing, agonizing heat. Blood instantly began to pour down the side of my face, pooling onto the deck. Through the hazy, fading dynamic of the chaos, I saw my cousin Vanessa push past my screaming mother. Vanessa pulled out her phone, leveled her eyes at my father, and yelled at the top of her lungs, "I'm calling 911. Roger just assaulted her. Get away from her, you psychopath." The next few minutes were a blurred, chaotic symphony of terror. I lay on the blood-slicked deck, my vision tunneling into a narrow pinprick of light. Through the fading audio of the world, I heard the shrieking of tires and the deafening authoritative roar of sirens. Within 7 minutes of Vanessa's frantic 911 call, 4 Columbus police cruisers and an emergency paramedic unit swarmed the property, their red and blue lights reflecting wildly off the pristine glass windows of Austin's suburban house. Roger, realizing the absolute gravity of the felony he had just committed in front of 50 witnesses, had panicked the moment he saw the first flashing lights. He dropped the dented aluminum crutch and fled out the back gate, running blindly into the dense woods bordering the neighborhood. The paramedics rushed onto the deck, applying heavy pressure to the deep, gushing laceration on my skull. As they stabilized my neck and lifted me onto a rigid stretcher, I forced my eyes open to look at my family one last time. The scene was pure poetic karma. The superhero birthday music was still playing mockingly in the background, while 2 police officers slammed Austin against the side of his shiny new truck, pulling his arms behind his back and clicking heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Another officer was reading my mother Megan her Miranda rights, while she sobbed hysterically, her expensive dress stained with the dirt of the backyard. They were being arrested on the spot for corporate financial fraud, identity theft, and acting as accessories to a violent felony. Teresa was sitting on the grass, clutching Liam and screaming as the neighbors watched the entire high-class illusion crumble into the dirt. I was rushed to the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, the exact same hospital where my journey had begun. Doctors treated my severe concussion and closed the wound in my scalp with 14 stitches. But while I lay in that hospital bed, things moved rapidly. Because the crime was so severe and the evidence so absolute, a judge immediately granted an emergency order to freeze all of Austin and Roger's bank accounts. The $20,000 sports car down payment was legally revoked, and the remaining funds were seized as criminal restitution. 2 weeks later, using my own recovered court-protected money, I was finally wheeled into the operating room for my long-awaited secondary orthopedic reconstruction surgery. The 5-hour procedure was a complete success. The surgeons realigned my hip, cleared out the damaged scar tissue, and gave me a real fighting chance. The legal battle that followed over the next few months was brutal, but I remained ice cold. My mother and brother sent desperate letters from jail begging me to drop the charges, crying that family shouldn't sue family. I never replied. I handed every letter straight to the district attorney. Roger was captured 3 weeks after the assault, hiding out in a dingy, run-down motel near the state border. When the final sentencing came down, the judge showed them absolutely no mercy for aggravated felony assault with a deadly weapon on a disabled person. Roger was sentenced to 7 years in a state penitentiary. Austin and Megan both received 3 years in federal prison for felony financial fraud and identity theft. Their reputations were completely obliterated, their assets liquidated to pay off their mounting debts. As for me, I took my life back. I secured my corporate laptop, locked down every single one of my financial accounts with advanced biometric security, and moved out of my parents' toxic house forever. I rented a gorgeous sunlit high-rise apartment in downtown Columbus with Florida-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city skyline. 6 months into my mandatory, intense physical therapy sessions at a local rehabilitation clinic, I met a man named Caleb. He was one of the lead physical therapists at the facility. From the very first day, he didn't look at me with pity, nor did he see me as an ATM. He saw my resilience. He spent hours helping me rebuild the strength in my right leg, cheering for me when I took my first tentative, agonizing steps without a cane, and holding my hand when the phantom pain became too much to bear. Yesterday, Caleb and I walked through the park downtown. I wasn't using a crutch. I wasn't using a cane. I was walking completely on my own 2 feet, my fingers tightly locked in his as we finalized the details for our upcoming wedding. I had to lose a toxic, parasitic family to realize my own worth. But standing there in the Ohio sunshine, completely independent, free, and genuinely loved, I knew I had finally won my justice. Standing on my own 2 feet today, I learned that you must fight for your own life. Let me know in the comments. Would you have sent your own family to prison if they did this to you? If my journey inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. Thank you for listening.